The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hello and welcome to Weighted Donuts. I'm Wayne Unger, and today our guest is Glenn Wilson, former baseball player, author. Glenn, thanks for coming on. I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Wayne. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. So, I tell you what. Let's start with the beginning, or I should say, let's just start with the beginning at the major leagues. You started out with the Tigers,
correct?
And according to some things I read, you weren't a favorite of Sparky.
Yeah, very strange, very, very strange scenario. I was their number one draft pick in 1980. Got to the big leagues in 82. They had some injuries in their outfield before the home opener. The home opener in 82 had been snowed out, so they opened up on the road, and then they came back home for a series, but they had two outfielders get injured. Howard Johnson, you may remember from the Mets mainly. He and I were with the Tigers farm system, and we were called up together on the 13th of April of that 1982 season, our rookie season. And the team was in Toronto. We met the team in Toronto, and then the greatest memory I have of that was obviously when you first walk into the big league clubhouse, even if it's on the road or at home, and you see your jersey hanging there with your name on the back. It's a really awesome feeling. Now, with that said, my upbringing was never any doubt that I would be a professional athlete. I thought it would be football, though. I was a crazy Joe Namath fan, but I had an older brother who was 8 years older than me who wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. He was the guy that collected cards. He watched all the games, read all the box scores. He was a freak about baseball, and I didn't care about any of that. But I was blessed with a lot of talent. So by the time I was 6, I was playing every day in the backyard with him, what we called automatic men, and we were using a plastic golf ball because back in those days, the plastic golf balls were made really, really hard. It was very hard to break them or even dent them. And they were on sale all the time. They were for sale at the little hardware store down the street from where we lived for 25 cents a bag, and you got about 30 balls. And that lasted us an entire summer. And we played automatic men, meaning I pitched to him, he pitched to me, but he decided if where the ball was hit, would the player have made the play. And so every day of the summer, every day of the winter, and after school, I had to play plastic baseball because if I didn't, he'd beat me up. Our dad had passed away when I was 6, and he was determined to be a Major League Baseball player, and he needed somebody to help him, and I was his toy. But what he did was he built a green monster in our left field area in our backyard using wood and that chicken wire. And he nailed that chicken wire, and he even painted it green like the Green Monster. So we had a green chicken wire left field fence as a muster because it was really short to left field, so that would help us have to get the ball up. And we got many complaints from the neighbor lady because we were hitting her house with plastic golf balls. But the funniest parts were I didn't get to use a bat. I had to use a broomstick. And he had to use a regular baseball bat because he was training himself. And with him being 8 years older than me, obviously he was better because he could throw a 4-foot curveball, which he actually used his right finger, used his knuckle to make the ball curve. But he could throw strikes, he could throw really hard, and me using a broomstick, you know, it gave me plenty of bat speed to get around on him, you know, at certain times. And we had some great games, and we even kept stats, he did rather, of how many home runs we had hit that year, how many doubles. I mean, the guy was just an absolute amazing with statistics and following the game and making sure everything was done right. He even invented a dice baseball game that has never been marketed that I've thought many times, you know, I wonder if this would go over in today's times. I doubt it would.
It probably wouldn't.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I thought it might, because, you know, everybody that loves baseball like he does, which are most fans. Most fans are just like him. They love the game of baseball, just adore it. Their favorites are always their favorites. The ones they dislike, they always dislike, and that's how baseball fans are. And the good news for me was I was never a baseball fan. I never followed the game. People would always ask me when I got to the big leagues, who was your favorite player? And I would say nobody. Joe Namath, that was the only guy. Him and Muhammad Ali were the two guys I liked because they talked a little smack, not major, but a little, and they backed it up, though. So it was comical. People couldn't understand why I could not, how I could play Major League Baseball and have never been a fan of Major League Baseball. And to this day, I'm not a fan of Major League Baseball. But going back to the Sparky situation, you know how when you first get to a new school or to school, you notice right away people that don't like you? Well, that's how it was with Sparky. You know, I'd been the number one pick, and I get to that first spring training where I'm over at minor league camp, and he would actually intentionally walk by me where I was stretching and look at me. Never say a word, just look at me, and then walk off. And I thought, man, that's strange. And then it wasn't but a year later that I was at big league spring training. And the same thing. He would walk by my locker, and he would always be a smartass. He would always say, "How are you today, Mr. Wilson?" And I thought, you know, what is up with this guy? Why does he dislike me, or did I do something? Maybe I hit on his daughter. I couldn't figure this guy out to save my life. And then when I got called up to the big leagues with Howard Johnson, he called Hojo and I into his office and told us we were not to associate with anybody that had 4 or more years of experience in the major leagues on or off the field. And I didn't say a word. Hojo and I turned around, walked out, and we looked at the clubhouse because everybody was getting dressed. And I said, turned to Hojo and I said, well, looks like you and I are going to be friends for a while. Because on that Tiger 82 team, there weren't a whole lot of guys with less than 4 years experience except relief pitchers. And, you know, most position players didn't hang out with relief pitchers in those days, you know, unless you'd known each other a long time. And I'd only been in the minor leagues a year and a half, so I didn't have a chance to really know any of the guys that might be coming up or might already be there. that I'd played maybe 20 games with or 10 games with. So it was a strange first induction into Major League Baseball.
Was anybody ever able to, did anyone ever explain to you why he had that rule, or was he just,
all I ever heard, and this was through the grapevine, was, actually it was in the newspaper that Sparky, did not like rookies. And my God, whatever you do as a rookie with Sparky, do not make a mistake, because he was going to bring it up either in the newspaper. I mean, this was back when the theory was you don't embarrass your players in the newspaper. Well, Sparky hadn't read that rule yet because he ate me up in the newspapers. And I don't know, it was just I believe that my personality also fed fuel to that fire. I was a very confident person, and I did not let anybody stand in my way. I didn't care if you were the owner of the team, if you were the manager of the team. You were not going to stand in my way of me having success, is the way I looked at it. And I did not know how to talk to the media, and I made a major mistake. My very first television interview, after 2 weeks in the big leagues, I was hitting close to 400 or a little over 400. I was making all the plays in the outfield, and I was asked by a writer or a television guy, well, are you surprised at how well you've done in your first 2 weeks in the big leagues? And I said, no, not at all. I said, I'll bet the fans are. I said, I've been doing this my whole life. Y'all just weren't there to see it. And that didn't go over well with Sparky or the coaches. And most of Sparky coaches were yes men, meaning whatever Sparky said goes. And then, of course, the players, they wanted guys that were humble and never said anything. And so I kind of alienated myself with some of the players also. Later that year, my rookie year, I was called into the office, and before that, let me go to this one real quick with Sparky. When it was time for me to go down because of the players coming off the disabled list, I didn't understand the system. And Sparky told me before a exhibition game, back when they had an exhibition game while the season had already started, we were going to play the Reds, his former team. He had managed 3 World Series, 2 he had won. He said, I'm going to send you down. I said, do what? He goes, I'm sending you down. I said, how can that be? I'm hitting over 400. He said, I just have to send you down. You need some things to work on. I'm the manager. You do what I say. I go, fuck you. I ain't doing that. And so I took my uniform off, started throwing it on the field. As I'm walking out, I quit, I told him. And sure enough, I got my street clothes on, was getting ready to head out of there. I was not schooled by anybody on how Major League Baseball worked. Well, Roger Craig, who went on to become the Giants manager, he was a pitching coach. He caught me, but right before I was getting ready to leave Tiger Stadium for good and drive back to Texas. And he said, hey, do me a favor. Before you leave, go up and see Jim Campbell. I said, who's Jim Campbell? He goes, he's our general manager. And I go, okay, well, yeah, I'll go see him. Because I really didn't want to leave, but, Sparky had pinned me into a corner. And, I didn't like his ego, and I had a big one too. So I went up and saw Jim Campbell. Jim Campbell took the time, at least 45 minutes, to explain to me how Major League Baseball worked. When a guy went on a DL, he might be under a 2 or 3 year contract, where I had options left which meant that they could send me down and then bring me back up 3 times. Each time you go either way, that was an option. And he goes, you already used up 2 now by sending you back down. So one more option, you have to stay, because obviously we're going to keep you on the 40-man roster because you were a number 1 draft pick, and we invested a lot of money in you. I said, oh, okay. I understand. I'll go down. And so, once it was explained to me and I understood it, I was okay with that. But, when I got called back up, and then the next year came around, and I hit 292 in 84 games as a rookie. My first year. And I was playing left field, center field, right field, DH for about a month. And then he stuck me in center field full time. And in my second year, he used me in right field full time, where I only hit 265 or 265, I think it was. But I drove in 65 runs hitting out of the 7-hole, where my rookie year I hit out of the 2-hole and hit 292, where you get more fastballs. And, next thing I know, I'm the guy being traded for him to get Willie Hernandez. So it worked out good for the Tigers. It worked out fine for me because I was going to get away from Sparky, because he and I would have come to blows, and he'd being as short as he was, I'd have gotten a lot of trouble. So that was a good thing, but, then, I went on to Philadelphia and did what I did. So, it worked out fine as far as the Sparky situation. We never, rectified. I was actually in the 85 All-Star game when he was the manager of the 85 All-Star game for the, opposing team. We said hello, and that was it. But, he had won his World Series, and I was the bait that got him his guy, Willie Hernandez, which he talks about in his book, or Bill LaJoy talked about in his book. Bill LaJoy was, the assistant general manager for the Tigers back in those days. So Sparky was happy, but I never felt like the man was fair with me. And so be it. We moved on. I went on to, my spots in life in the game of baseball. I had a good year, actually 3 pretty good years in Philadelphia after they finally moved me from left field to right field. And, led the league in assists those 3 years, and made that one All-Star team, which was very satisfying. But then the Phillies traded me. So once you get traded that second time, you're a journeyman now, and it's being known as a journeyman is not what any player wants to be known as. But hey, you do what you got to do. You hang in there as long as you can hang in there. And probably the only mistake I made as far as a player was when I saw the steroids coming around, I didn't use them, because trades were being made on guys that were using them. They were not being made on guys that weren't using them. So that's probably the only mistake I made, because I was only 30, in my early 30s when they were showing up, and my career was starting to unravel, because I got with another team there towards the end, the Astros, where they were getting ready to dismantle all of the higher paid salaries, which I was one of those guys now. So when I look back on my entire major league career, yeah, it was fun when I was between the white lines. Everything else is just a bunch of BS. And, but I'm satisfied. And I got a good retirement coming out of it. I got as many years in as I could. I played as hard as I could. And I played better mad anyway, so.
Now,
it was fun. It was a fun time.
Based on what you just said, so I'm not trying to set you up for anything controversial, but I'm not sure if I understood you correctly. So are you saying that you think you probably should have taken steroids?
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding?
Okay.
I mean, when I walked into, let's see, what year was it? 1991. Actually, yeah, 1991. Because I had injured my knee in 1990, had a major surgery and rehabbed it the best I could. It still wasn't quite ready to go, but I knew, where to go to doctors to get cortisone shots to numb that area up anytime it got real bad. But I was seeing, the needle already in 91. And when I saw the Texas Rangers at spring training in 1991, I was in shock. I thought I was looking at gladiators. And Pudge Rodriguez, Juan Gonzalez. I mean, you had monster guys now. You didn't have bodybuilders like Lance Parrish. You had gladiators. They made Lance Parrish look small, and Lance Parrish was the biggest and strongest baseball player I had ever been around, him and Brian Downing.
So
you gotta remember, that's the part, Wayne, that nobody ever talks about. They always talk about the guys that didn't aren't in the Hall of Fame because they used steroids. They never talk about the guys they pushed out of baseball because they did use steroids. And I just refused to use them, and that was probably a dumb decision on my part, because I had experienced with Dianabol way back in one of the winters when I was in Philadelphia, and I saw how fast you could get your body bigger, but I only used them for those 3 months, or in the off season. I never took them during the season. Of course, they weren't illegal then either. But we had seen some other players that were using them. But because Lyle Alzado and Len Matuzak came out and talked about, their brain cancer was caused by Dianabol, which was the only steroid that was known of at the time, at least in my area, Texas, Michigan, where I'd been. I realized that I didn't want brain cancer, so I didn't use them then after that 3 months with them. But I noticed what it did mentally to me. Mentally, it made me focus so much better. It was unbelievable. And I was already really focused. And it made me want to lift weights. So I can only imagine what they were doing with the needle. I don't know what was in it, but I do know why steroids were created originally. They were created to prolong internal organs in older people. I asked a doctor about that one time, and that was the answer he gave me. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. But what I'm amazed at...
They also give steroids to people who are to help them bounce back from chemo and radiation.
Do they? See, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yes, and they're also. I mean, my mother had multiple myeloma, which is bone cancer, and they gave her like a drip once a month, and also once a week she would take these steroid pills. She didn't like them. She said they made her crazy, and she was so happy when the doctor told her she couldn't take them anymore. But that was also to build up the strength in her bones, because otherwise she would have had like immense bone pain, and her bones would just basically just start to break. So,
that's awful. I hate that for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thankfully, she was stable for a few years. So, in the end, when it turned bad, we were relieved for her because it was quick. But yeah, I mean, but getting back to steroids in the major leagues, from what you saw as far back as 1990, just an opinion. I know you don't have data, but just on opinion, what would you say was the percentage of major league players using steroids back in 1990? Let's say.
I'd say in 1990, I'd say you had probably 30% to 30 to 40%. By 93, you had 70%. By 95, you had 100%. I say 100%. You never got 100% because there's some guys that were just afraid of them.
Right. Yeah.
I'd say 90 to 95. And then it lasted because of the strike. No, because of the strike year, no World Series year. What was that, 94 or 95?
That was 94.
Yeah. So 95, was perfect timing. It was the blossoming of the steroid. It was full blown. And it restored baseball because of the McGuire and the Sosa chase. And, the one thing I look at though is this right here, is if one player in which we have guys in the Hall of Fame right now that took steroids. And I think we all know who they are, but I know I do. But I will never come out and say who they are. But here's what I would like to see happen. And this is how I think we get those guys in the Hall of Fame faster. Because they belong. They put up the numbers. They took the risk. It's a dangerous risk to take because we don't know what these steroids are going to do to them down the road. So, to their credit, they took them. Whatever. I believe that if one player would get announced that he's going in the Hall of Fame, but during his speech at the end says, "But I used steroids." So now you have to let everybody in. Then the writers would come off their high horse and I think start voting everybody in. It's
a
just
lot
like
of writers I speak to already, a lot of writers, their thing is, it's not 100% proven. Some writers I speak to who say this person was caught a few times already, like they say Manny Ramirez, no. Rafael Palmeiro, no. They say no because basically he was busted. For the ones where there's innuendo, they go, no, you can't keep a guy out on innuendo. But I've been saying for years.
Barry Bonds.
For years, yeah. Well, even still, he was not really busted, and
never tested positive.
Yeah, I believe his conviction was for perjury, and he had that overturned. So,
correct.
And my thing is, and I've been saying this for years, I said, you know what? You can't exclude people. That was the game. To me, it was, and my number has always been, I always say it's always been at least 75%. I say it was a level playing field. So you can't, can't exclude somebody.
No, I mean, it was, you got to look at it, one way or the other. Either you're dead 100% against it and you don't vote for them, or you put yourself in their shoes. Okay, you're playing right field and you're hitting 14 home runs a year, and the guy playing beside you used to hit 14 home runs a year who's playing center, but he's hitting 30 a year now. Would you do them then? Put yourself in that guy's shoes that used to hit 14 a year and is still hitting 14 a year. Would you have done it?
Or a guy like Brady Anderson, who actually, a guy like Brady Anderson actually went from like 14 to 50.
Right. Right,
So,
absolutely. And what people don't realize is it's not just the strength, and it's really not the quickness that helps. It's the concentration that it gives you is phenomenal. I mean, even just driving down the freeway, it's almost like you got four eyes, two in the back of your head and two in the front, and you can see all angles. It is amazing, and that was just my experience with the Diana ball pill for 3 months in the off season.
So it must be a similar effect.
I would think it's greater. Yeah.
Some players actually have a medical exception, and they're allowed to take Adderall, which is an ADHD drug. Which is highly attention deficit syndrome. And
highly addictive. Yes.
Yeah. And I off the top of my head, I can't. I believe Chris Davis was one player who had gotten the exception.
What are the two, Wayne? What are the two most exciting parts of the game of baseball? What are the two things that people are going to stop if they're walking by the TV and they hear this or this? What's going to make them stop and watch?
A home run hitter.
Correct. And number two is a guy pitching a no-hitter.
Yeah.
And he's into the eighth or seventh. You're going to stop. You're going to stop and watch. And Bud Selig knew, all the owners knew, all the managers knew. That's why the trades that were made were being made, and the guys that were being released were being released. I mean, come on, think about it. And, if you know that Palmeiro's using and you got a chance to get him, you're going to try to get him. I mean, trades were made off of this substance, and everybody knew about it. So that's the part that, it's hard for me. I've never liked the fact that writers vote for the Hall of Fame anyways. I know it's always been done that way, but to me it's like taking a glorified fan and saying, okay, here, you vote for the Hall of Fame guys. And it's really, the voting on the Hall of Fame is really kind of simple. You just look at the numbers, you look at the fact that he had this many RBIs, he played this many years, he had this many home runs, and there's always that number of 500. If they get over 500 home runs, well, my goodness, of course they're going to go in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I remember because I was with Mike Schmidt when he was pursuing 500, who never used steroids, and never. And, once he knew, once he got to 500, that was his ticket. And I was the guy getting behind him for his third MVP. So I got to see number 400 and all the ones in between, all the way up to 500 and I think 12 or 14, something like that.
Wow.
So it's an interesting subject. But back to what we were discussing earlier about what you mentioned in your opening about my book. I talk about a little bit about the steroids in my book. It's called Headed Home, a MLB All-Star Search for Truth. And I go in search of the truth about a lot of things. And one of them being, why did I become a Major League Baseball player? I didn't even want to be a Major League Baseball player. And how it happened is just ridiculous. It would never happen that way in today's times. Because I went to college strictly on a football scholarship and was asked to play baseball also. And I said, will it get me out of spring football? And they said, yeah. I said, okay, I'll play. And, and then I go out and I break their school records, most of the power records and batting average my sophomore year. And in my junior year, I'd do it again, but this time I hit 439 instead of 379. And, you know, I'm told by a scout, I don't even know I'm going to get drafted. I knew there were a lot of scouts at the games, but I didn't know they were there to see me because the college ballparks at NAIA level aren't like they are now. I mean, we had your basic high school type field. But walking out of my last college game, a scout walked by me and said, well, if you're still around by the third round, we're going to take you. And my mother said, who are you with? And he said, the Astros. And so Nolan Ryan cost me a chance of being drafted by my hometown team. Because they had traded for him the year before and had to give up their first round pick. And he and I had talked about that several times during our careers.
Oh, wait. They signed him as a free agent, possibly.
Correct.
They weren't.
Correct.
Yes, and they lost. You have to forfeit your pick, right? Yes,
yes, sir.
Because they didn't allow trading of picks. They modified it somewhat. You still can't trade first round picks, which I think is, you know, I think it's they've modified it. You're allowed to trade. I forgot what it's called, like compensation picks or things like that. But yeah, you still can't trade a first round pick in baseball.
Because I honestly watched baseball when the steroid era was going on after I was out of baseball and it was rampant. I followed it when Bonds was at the plate or if Nolan had a no-hitter going. But other than that, I didn't care to watch baseball. That to me, it was a boring sport compared to football. Which to this day, I'm still a diehard college football fan. More no certain team, just mainly quarterbacks. I love watching quarterbacks. Good quarterbacks.
Now, when you played college football, were you scouted? Did you get any?
Oh yeah, you bet.
Did you get any hint that you would have been drafted in the NFL?
Oh, I was told by Gerald Wilson was his name, kicker, punter from Kansas City, that they would be drafting me after my senior year as a punter only, though, which I wasn't too excited about. But hey, you know, it was pro football. And I started as a freshman as a receiver and led the receivers in yards per catch. So, you know, things were going fine. It's just that baseball drafted me my junior year. And I'd had already had enough of college and working 2 jobs to, you know, remember, you know, I didn't grow up like, you know, spoon-fed. You know, I only had one parent and mom had 3 boys to raise and I was a baby. So, you know, we never had a lot of money.
Right. So after baseball, what did you do after baseball?
I owned gas stations. I'd bought gas stations with my money, and I got up to 5, and then sold out to the Saudis, all 5 of them. And so I did pretty good financially, and then I went into managing minor league independent baseball because it was still in my blood. Baseball was. And managing was so much more fun than playing that I had wished, you know, I'd started it sooner instead of waiting until I was in my 40s or getting close to 40. So I managed independent minor league baseball 4 years. And then now I'm coaching at a high school since I'm retired and drawing my retirement. and I basically donate my time to this Christian high school baseball team.
Excellent. And you love it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am honestly, I think my best gift, even above playing the game of baseball, is my ability to see things that are going to happen before they happen, based on, the players. After I've seen the opposing team go through their order one time, I've got a pretty good feel. And then, of course, knowing my own players, their capabilities. But I'm a huge stat guy, meaning, and I don't mean cybermetrics. I still don't even know what cybermetrics are. I still go by old stats. Like when I was managing independent ball, I had to find my own players. For pitchers, I went by one set of stats: strikeout per inning. Those were the pitchers I looked at. If they had one strikeout per inning, or close, or more, or a little bit more, or a little bit less, then I looked at that person. Okay? Then once I got them and looked at them, I judged them on if they could help my team or not, on whether I would want to face them or not. Obviously they didn't throw as hard, most of them, but, it wasn't that far behind. And then on hitters, of course, that was the easy part for me. I mean, if a guy is taking batting practice and he's launching balls over the light tower, he's probably going to be a pretty solid hitter, or he's going to be a total bust, one of the two. And then, being strong up the middle defensively, and then hopefully finding doubles hitters for the corners. And my system has worked so far. I took this 3 out of my 4 years managing pro ball. We went to the World Series, and then this last year we came within one game of the state title, which is only a 2-game state title. And the team that beat us, they won the state title. And I had no player on my team last year that had played what is called that select baseball, tournament baseball. What that's all they do is play baseball year round. I had none of those.
Travel teams, yes.
Yeah, I had nobody that had ever played travel ball for any length of time. What I had was what I called 4.5 good athletes, and I was able to move them in to the positions that I felt they needed to be in to help us defensively, based on who was pitching that day or who I was bringing in at a particular time. And I actually played a 5-man infield and just 2 outfielders a couple of times, also in the playoffs.
Well, sabermetrics, they use a lot of defensive stats today in evaluating players. So you know what? Sabermetrics, as they're being used today, would actually enhance Glenn Wilson's value.
Once they teach them to me, probably so. But the biggest part, I dream of some major league organization calling me and saying, hey, we need a GM, or we need an assistant GM, or we need a field manager. Even though my field manager skills are okay, they're not great. And with today's player making so much money, I don't know how great I could be politically correct with them, because I'm an old school guy. What I do know is that my system works as far as, the guys that are needed to help your team win. I was actually thinking about this before we talked today, in the aspect of, I'm losing track, but I think it was on, I saw where the Mets were trying to blame the Wilpongs, for their downfalls, instead of their general manager, who is it? Not Alomar, but
it's Sandy Alderson.
Yes, Alderson. And they're trying to either blame him or Wilpong, and the writer ends up blaming Wilpong because Alderson has gone to sabermetrics strictly. And where I'm of the belief that stats are a good thing, but they're not the only thing, because this is why Leland was such a good manager, but not a great manager. Leland wanted to know how his horses work, meaning he would ask the tough questions. So you're taking batting practice, you're standing in the outfield and shagging fly balls, and Leland was thinking about the fact that he had put you in the lineup, already, and he would come ask you some off-the-wall question about either your wife or your kid or how's the apartment working out, because, you'd just been traded over. He wanted to know how comfortable you were. And that's what led me to the theory of remembering what I experienced as a major league player. What made me comfortable when I was playing? What made me feel like I was going to have success? It was two things. One was piss me off, which Dave Bristol did an awesome job. Dave Bristol of the Reds, before Sparky got the team, he was my third base coach in Philly the year I drove in the 100 RBIs, which I never even thought about doing. I didn't know that was a big deal. But when it got to 91, I wanted it. And, but he went out of his way to tick me off almost every day. And I could not understand. He was almost like a Sparky, except worse. But it made me a better player. And I read the article I think you did, or you posted, about Barry Bonds. And Barry Bonds trying to be like Tony Gwynn with the media. Maybe that was you, maybe it wasn't. But there was an article on Bonds, and Tony Gwynn, where Tony Gwynn told Barry, do everything I do at the All-Star game and watch how I treat the media. And Barry did. Well, after the All-Star game, Barry went into his first prolonged slump of his life. And Barry,
that might have been the article that Barry Bloom wrote.
It could be. And Barry realized what he was doing wrong. He was trying to be somebody he wasn't. And that's key to playing the game of baseball, because, if you have success 3 out of 10 times, you're one of the best in the world. But getting to 3 out of 10 times at that level can be very difficult at times. And you need to know what makes him tick. Do you need to pat him on the back more? Do you need to chew him out? Do you need to bring him into your office and talk to him? What do you need to do to make that player, to know what makes that player tick?
It's funny, Mark Littell, when he managed, he talked about, you got to know what's going on at home with the guy.
Yep.
He brought, I was on his show with Ralph Tycho, who's our producer, a couple of months back, and yes, and that was something he mentioned. But to me, I think sabermetrics have their place. Like anything that goes to the extreme, it's just, in a theory that goes to the extreme, it's just going to get overused and it's going to get exposed. I think using the new numbers that are available can be extremely helpful, but you have to use your eyeballs. You have to, a manager, and a GM, they have to use their intuition. That article that you saw about the Mets and too much sabermetrics, what the writer was saying is, you can't blame it all on the Mets' use of, on overuse of analytics. What he's saying is that so many of the Mets' baseball decisions are also being, are based on dollars, and they're running a New York market team like a 1990s small market team before there was revenue sharing. And,
right.
and he's saying so that, that them, using that, looking at it that way is actually, they're not looking at what the problem, there's an old saying when there's, when your finger is pointing one way and from that that direction you're pointing at, there's 5 fingers pointing back at you, you might want to take a stronger look at where the 5 fingers are pointing as opposed to where the one is pointing.
Well, here's the theory I've got, and I like that, but here's the theory I've got. Okay, let's say your baseball player is a heart surgeon, and his wife, he just caught his wife the night before cheating on him. Do you want him operating on you that next day?
Oh, definitely not. I'm not, listen,
okay.
I'm not saying
okay,
that
so,
having a pulse of the player doesn't have its place.
So that's why it's important to have a staff that works under your manager that is able to have relationships with your players so that they can find those things out before you put that surgeon on the field, because obviously you're paying this guy a lot of money, but yet his wife just cheated on him the night before. Now you're going to throw him in a game, but he doesn't play well if he's angry. Well, that's an advantage to know that. So to give that guy a day off or two.
But there are other analytics that have been huge as far as making personnel decisions. And I'll give you the Houston Astros are a prime example. They signed Charlie Morton last year, and their analytics department said, "Yeah, get this guy. His spin rate is off the charts." And you know what? And they were able to work with him. Look at Justin Verlander. How,
Well, that's a different animal there. I mean, come on.
Yeah, there were a number of things that contributed to that.
The Astros.
But again,
the Astros are
are
totally analytical team now. There's no doubt. I mean, ever since Lunau came over, they got caught stealing some of the stuff from the Cardinals.
No. Actually, they didn't get caught stealing. It was actually
the Cardinals
St.
stealing.
Louis.
Right.
It was St. Louis. An assistant GM from St. Louis actually got caught hacking into their system.
That's what it was.
Yes. But you see,
but you watch,
here it is.
You watch what happens though.
You look at the Astros are a perfect example of a team that's able to, pass on their analytical information to their coaches and point things, and they're able to work hand in hand to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and they did not have the best bullpen in baseball last year.
No, they didn't.
So they proved,
and it was actually starting pitches. It was actually, starting pitches that stepped up and saved them, in the postseason.
Exactly. So analytics, we know, based on last year alone, we know it works with offensive players and starting pitchers. And because they just used nothing but analytics pretty much from everything I've read. But does it work?
And it's
does
also
it work on an entire team?
It saved some careers as well of some starting pitchers that couldn't get through, that can't get through the lineup, and converted them to it either, teams with deep bullpens, will only let a starting pitcher go through the lineup 2-3 times, or have converted certain starters to relievers, knowing that they can't get through a lineup 3 times. That's when they start to get hit. So,
well,
you know what? It's the problem is that people, we've become a society of extremism, and we've lost. I think we've lost our way as far as compromise. And common sense, and and accepting other viewpoints, whether it be politically, whether it be with in sports, and just everywhere. So.
And sports is always going to be changing. That's a given. However, it's kind of like I always say, it's like the wheel. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But with analytics, you're going to have to continue to dig deeper into something else eventually. Because right now with analytics, you're having a lot of people not get drafted because of analytics. Because their numbers don't match up to what because it's been around long enough now to know that, okay, if we draft a guy because of this, and this, based on analytics, he will have success at the major league level by such and such year, based on all of our data, as opposed to actually, studying the player the way they did in the old days with the scouts and the older guys, of actually going out and watching these guys on a regular basis, as opposed to 2 to 3 times a year, and then looking at his stats and comparing them, though, with the new stats of analytic stats.
Yeah,
so the game of baseball will evolve again.
But you know what? But here it is. Like, I remember what got me into starting to follow minor league baseball was a book written by Kevin Corain called $$ on the Muscle. And that really changed a lot of things for me. And I actually was fortunate enough to get him on my show I think it was about a year and a half ago. And we had Jerry Krasnick, writer for ESPN, joined us on the show. But back then also, there was also he's got that body. He looks like a ball player. Now, he doesn't look like a ball player. Or guys with red hair. No, they're too fair-skinned. The sun will bother them. And, there were also a lot of, really so-called myths as well in the old days of scouting. And Billy Beane is, and that's something that Billy Beane was big on, busting those myths, because Billy Beane said, I looked like the ball player. I was that guy that the scouts looked like, and said, oh, he's a ball player, but I wasn't. And that got Billy Beane to look deeper into other things as well. So it's really it's almost like a two-headed monster.
He looked into other things really deep too.
Yeah. So it's like I say, it's basically comes down to it's always baseball, it's always they're going to go with the next big thing. Now you have the shifts, you have the launch angles, the exit velocity, the spin rate, of course, the radar gun. Radar gun is great, but you know what? You know what they say? A ground ball double play is a pitcher's best friend as well. So, listen. I love the strikeout, but I also like, I like a high ground ball rate, which we're not seeing much anymore because of the way players are approaching the way they hit the ball. So now and to combat that, you're seeing pitchers pitch up in the zone more, which is going to, it's going to result in more fly balls. But as long as the fly balls don't go out of the park, that's okay. So,
but they made all the parks smaller.
Yeah. So, Glenn, we're running out of time here. Now, your book, it's called Headed Home. It is available. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on Kindle as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what about yourself? Do you have copies yourself that you sell?
I do. I have some left. Not a lot, but I have about 30 left here at the house. So if they want to contact me via Facebook, they can request. Friend request me with a message, and I'll be happy to sell it to them that way.
Excellent, because then they'll get an autograph.
Exactly.
Okay. Excellent.
Or if they buy it on Amazon, they can contact me on Facebook, and then I can give them my address, and they can send it to me that way also.
Excellent. Yeah, so if anyone does have a copy of the book, if you want to send it with a postage-paid envelope, return envelope, send it to Glenn. Otherwise, you can contact him on Facebook, or you can contact me, and I can pass information back and forth. However it is, Headed Home. Anyone who's listened to the show today will know one thing. There'd be truth in that book. No fluff. So, Glenn, thank you very much for coming on, and I really appreciate the time.
It's been great.
To give us.
Thanks for having me, Wayne. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. You have a great day.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed the show. I know I did. I certainly enjoyed hearing about Sparky Anderson, the steroids. To me, that was, huge insight. So you all have a great day, and we'll see you next time.